few years ago, my friend Tez and I decided to embark on the road trip of a lifetime across the United States. We were in our early 20s, full of excitement and adventure, but strapped for cash. Our plan was to drive from New York to Los Angeles, taking a winding route across the country over 6 weeks. We didn't have a set schedule or even a clear itinerary. All we wanted was to explore nature, meet new people, and enjoy the absolute freedom of the open road. Since my mom had been a long-haul truck driver for years, I got the idea to save money by sleeping in the back of our small hatchback car. We bought blankets and sheets from a cheap Goodwill store and cut one of them up to make curtains for privacy. After just a few days on the road, we became pros at converting the car into a makeshift bedroom in less than 10 minutes. Shifting luggage to the front seats, hanging up the curtains, and laying out the bedding. We would sleep in parking lots, free campgrounds, or even roadside rest areas. We always searched for spots that were safe and at least somewhat legal. During the first few weeks, we never felt scared. Every night was a new adventure. We met amazing people along the way, from musicians playing under thunderstorms to families who invited us to dinner. We even learned country dancing at a tiny bar with an 80-year-old cowboy. All these experiences gave us a sense of security and confidence. But that changed in the last week of our trip when we arrived in Arizona, near Flagstaff. That day, we found a free campsite using a Google app. The site was deep in the woods, far from town. When we arrived, we noticed an RV parked there and a few other cars scattered among the trees. We parked near the RV and greeted the man who opened its door. But he only gave us a blank stare, then slowly shut the door while keeping his eyes fixed on us. It was odd, but we assumed he just wanted his privacy, so we decided to move further away. That evening, the forest around us grew eerily quiet. After setting up camp, we took out our portable stove to cook some instant noodles. The sky turned a deep orange, and the chirping of crickets filled the air. As we sat down to eat, a stray dog appeared from the woods, wagging its tail. It looked hungry, so we shared some of our food with it. The dog stayed close to us, lying by the fire as if it had known us forever. It gave us a comforting sense of companionship in the isolated woods. As night fell, we decided to skip setting up our usual camp. Instead, we sat outside, laughing, smoking, and taking silly pictures under the stars. Tez noticed a campfire nearby and suggested we go say hi to the people there. This was our usual routine. We'd offer a drink or strike up a friendly conversation. And almost every time, we met wonderful people. As we approached the fire, we found two men sitting around it. One of them seemed eccentric, talking about aliens, and clearly under the influence of something, but he appeared harmless. The other man claimed to be a former forest ranger. He was friendly, handsome, and calm. We spent hours talking about our trip, our families, and our dreams. But after a while, the conversation took a strange turn. The ranger started talking about a bear he'd seen near the campsite. When Tez expressed disbelief, he pulled out his camera and showed us pictures of the bear. The photos were taken very close to where we were camping, which made us uneasy. It wasn't far-fetched to encounter a bear at night, but the ranger's expression and the tone of his voice when he said, "If you step out of your car at night, the bear won't be your biggest concern," sent chills down my spine. We tried to steer the conversation to other topics, but the ranger kept bringing it back to the dangers lurking in the woods. Each time we changed the subject, he circled back. When he stood up to grab a drink from a cooler just outside the firelight, we suddenly noticed a small red flash in the dark. He was holding a camera. He had taken a picture of us without asking or even warning us. Then he adjusted the camera settings and took another photo with the flash. There was no explanation or question about whether we were okay with it. His behavior was deeply unsettling. Tez and I exchanged worried glances. We decided it was time to leave. As we stood up, the eccentric man talking about aliens said, "Good night," while the ranger gave us a cold smile and said, "Be careful. There's more than just bears out there." We hurried back to our car. Tez, panicked, asked me, "Why did he take our pictures?" I was shaking as I replied, "Sometimes serial killers leave warnings." She locked the doors and whispered, "Do you think he took them to mark us as victims?" I felt a wave of terror. We decided not to take any chances. Since we hadn't set up camp yet, we quickly drove off. As we left, we noticed the ranger walking toward our car with that same chilling smile. Driving back onto the main road, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Tez kept glancing in the rearview mirror, and every time headlights appeared behind us, we tensed up. Eventually, we found a motel several miles away and decided to spend the night there. The old woman at the reception desk looked surprised when we walked in so late, but she handed us a key without asking too many questions. That night, we barely slept. Every sound outside the motel room felt like a threat, and we kept the curtains tightly shut. By morning, we decided to cut our trip short and head straight to Los Angeles without any more stops. The joy and freedom we had felt at the beginning of our journey had been replaced by a lingering sense of unease. Months later, I sometimes found myself thinking about that night in Arizona. I wondered who the ranger really was and why he had acted the way he did. I also thought about the stray dog that had stayed with us. It had disappeared into the woods just before we left the campsite. Sometimes I like to imagine that the dog had been a guardian of sorts, warning us to leave before it was too late. That road trip was filled with beautiful memories and unforgettable experiences, but it also taught us an important lesson. Always trust your instincts and never underestimate the dangers that can hide in the shadows. To this day, I can't help but feel a chill whenever I think about that dark forest and the stranger who smiled too much. Every summer, nearly every New Year, my family would pack up the car and set off on a road trip to visit our relatives in Mexico. These trips were an annual tradition, and we never encountered any issues, that is, until one particular journey when I was 8 years old. Just like every other road trip before it, we left our home in North Texas at around 6 p.m., aiming to reach our destination by the following morning. Around 2 a.m., we crossed the border into Mexico, and that's when things started to get strange. When you're driving along a deserted stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, it's easy not to be overly concerned when the same car has been following you for miles. The night was nearly pitch black, with only the faint glow of distant stars above us and the eerie outlines of cacti punctuating the barren landscape. We had been in Mexico for about an hour and still had some distance to cover. I remember dozing off, but remaining somewhat aware of my surroundings because I was never able to fully fall asleep in the car. Suddenly, I heard my mother call my father's name, her voice filled with tension. "Miguel, look at that car behind us. It's been trailing us since we left Laredo." My dad glanced at the rearview mirror and dismissed her concerns with a shrug. "It's probably someone on their way to Reynosa or another city. It's a common route." Despite his attempt to reassure her, my mom couldn't shake the unease she felt, keeping a wary eye on the car behind us. By this point, my siblings and I had also noticed the car, and we started to watch it from the gaps in the luggage that blocked the rear window. It wasn't long before my mother's anxiety grew stronger. "It's getting closer," she muttered. We all turned to look, and sure enough, the car was rapidly closing the gap. "It's too close, Miguel," my mom said in a trembling voice. By now, the car was nearly bumper to bumper with ours, and in the vast emptiness of the highway, with hours still to go before daylight, it felt downright terrifying. There was nothing we could do. My dad neither slowed down nor sped up. He simply continued driving as the car followed, its headlights blinding in our rearview mirror. For the next half hour, the tension was palpable. The car would occasionally pull back, only to rush forward again, as though it knew it was scaring us and was enjoying it. It was during one of these brief moments, when the car had fallen back, that my mother spotted a police car parked up ahead on the side of the road. Without hesitation, she urged my dad to pull over. "Pull over, Miguel, right now," right in front of the police. My dad complied, and we came to a stop directly in front of the officer. The policeman approached and asked if everything was all right. My mother quickly explained the situation, describing how the car had been following us and how it was making us feel unsafe. The officer took her concern seriously and told us that people had been targeted and even had their cars stolen on these isolated highways by criminals. He offered to escort us, driving behind us to ensure our safety. Relieved, we drove off with the police cruiser following behind. But just 10 minutes later, our relief turned to fear when we saw the same car again. It had pulled over to the side of the road, waiting for us. My mom's worst fears were confirmed. Another unsettling experience occurred when I was on a road trip with a colleague through West Texas. We were driving along a desolate highway where gas stations and truck stops were few and far between. Late into the night, we were getting low on gas and decided to pull off at the next station, which appeared to be a lonely outpost. As we entered the gas station, something felt off. The coffee maker inside was brewing a fresh pot, but the monitors showing the store's interior were nothing but static. And then I saw it, a large streak of blood with handprints on the back door. My heart raced, and I immediately felt a chill run down my spine. I told my friend we needed to leave, but she didn't understand my urgency at first. As we rushed back to the car, I noticed another vehicle in the lot, a beat-up, dented car with a gun rack in the window. Once we were safely in the car, I noticed the back door of the gas station opening. I panicked as we drove away, and it wasn't until we were 40 miles down the road that I managed to get a phone signal and call the police. I never heard anything back about it, and to this day, I wonder what would have happened had we stayed. In 1999, I went on a road trip with my friend Tay, and we were exploring caverns in central Virginia. At 19, it was the first time we had driven so far from home without our parents. The journey took us down a highway marked with rest areas, which, by the time we needed one, were few and far between. Finally, we pulled into a rest stop at around 10 p.m. to use the restroom and grab some snacks. As we were deciding what to buy from the vending machines, we noticed that the cars around us had all left, except for a few tractor trailers parked far away in the back lot. It was then that an older navy blue Chevy truck pulled in, parking right next to our van. As we walked toward the van, Tay remarked how odd it was that the truck had parked so close, with plenty of other spaces available. We brushed it off, but as I squeezed between the truck and the van to get into the driver's seat, I felt uneasy. As I started the car, I saw the man from the truck standing by my window, knocking on it. I locked the door in panic, and he mumbled something about being lost. He seemed harmless at first, but then his behavior became more alarming. Before I could react, he reached through the crack in the window, trying to force it open. Tay started the car, and as we quickly backed out, the man made a chilling comment. "I've drunk blood fresher than yours anyway," before stepping back. We sped away, terrified, but didn't report the incident. We didn't want to be dismissed as overly cautious, but looking back, I can't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. One more frightening event occurred while my husband and I were on a cross-country trip through Texas. Texas is long and barren, and we were driving through miles of empty desert when we stopped at a small gas station. I went to use the restroom, and as I walked through the hall, I encountered a woman coming out of the other stall. She was disheveled and appeared to be lost, her wild gray hair and ragged clothing making her seem out of place. We exchanged a brief glance, and then her expression shifted, becoming unnervingly intense. I hesitated as I entered the stall, watching her through the mirror. Something about her posture felt off. She wasn't washing her hands or fixing her hair. She was standing still, tense and watchful, as though she were waiting for something. The discomfort I felt grew, and I stayed in the stall for as long as I could, hoping she would leave. After what seemed like an eternity, I heard her leave, but I waited longer just to be sure. Finally, I exited the stall and hurried to leave the restroom, but when I stepped outside, I saw her again, standing just outside the door, looking surprised to see me. My heart skipped a beat as I quickly slipped out the door and back to my husband. To this day, I don't know what that woman's intentions were, but I'm just thankful I left that gas station unharmed.